Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Act Subcommittee. I'm Louise Prince, Solicitor advising the committee this morning. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. A video and audio of the meeting and the papers shown on screen will be publicly available on the Council's website after the hearing. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee, officers and those making representations to introduce themselves. Everyone that speaks during the meeting is asked to introduce themselves each time they speak, so those listening know who is speaking. To ensure that those watching the live stream can hear properly, could all participants ensure that they switch their microphone on prior to speaking? Can I also ask that everyone turns either their devices or phones to silent or off before we start? Thank you. If I can ask the members to introduce themselves.
Hello, Councillor Peter Broomall, Wem Division.
Councillor Roy Allcroft, Market Drayton East Division.
Councillor Edward Towers, also the Wem Division.
Thank you. And any officers to introduce themselves, please.
Ross O'Neill, Licensing Officer.
Thank you. And now those making representations. We start with the applicants.
I'm here in support of the application. My name is David Chancellor. I'm Chair of Ludlow Food and Drink Festival.
My name's Karina Harris. I'm from Lonely Bagel Solicitors representing the applicants.
I'm Colin Spanner. I'm Secretary of Ludlow Rugby Club.
I'm Andy Wright. I'm President of Ludlow Rugby Club.
I'm Glenn Mayo, representing the Linney residents.
Keith Bell. I'm the president of the Bowls and Tennis Club. I'm also representing the residents of Cliff Park.
I understand that other people here today are going to speak. So when you come up to the microphone, if you could just introduce yourselves, and otherwise we could be here for hours introducing everybody before we actually get on to the matter in hand. So now turning to the agenda, if I can ask for nominations for chairman for today's hearing.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Councillor Allcroft has been elected.
Right. The committee has read and considered the representations and evidence submitted by all parties in relation to the application. Therefore, presentations should be succinct and kept to a brief summary of key points. There is no need to read out written representations or reiterate the details of written representations at a great length. The Chair will intervene if it is felt that presentations are becoming overly long, are going off track, or do not relate to the application being considered. The procedure for the hearing has been sent to you prior to the hearing. In general, we will aim to keep to this order of business to ensure the timely and fair conduct of the hearing for all parties. If it is felt necessary during the course of the hearing, the committee may make the decision to deviate from the procedure. This is at the committee's discretion. There are opportunities throughout the hearing for each party to ask questions of others following their presentations. Please ensure you use this opportunity to ask questions only and not to make any further points or statements. It is for the Chair to decide if questions are appropriate and relate to the matter in hand. Any behaviour considered to be disruptive by the Chair may lead to parties being muted or asked to leave the hearing. Does anybody have any questions regarding the hearing process or how the hearing may be conducted? Okay. Question for the licensing officer. have any of the representations made been withdrawn?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, one has been withdrawn following agreements with the authorities. That was the Ludlow Town Clerk, Gina Wilding.
Would any party present like to withdraw their representation? Does any party have any evidence not already submitted which they would like to put forward for consideration? Please be aware that this can be done with the agreement of all parties present and the subcommittee, and may necessitate the hearing being adjourned so it can be properly considered by all parties in the subcommittee. Any?
I've got a copy of some policy documents that were regarding the Spring Festival from last year, just as an example of how it's run for the next year.
Right.
So yeah, as the chair said, those can only be submitted with the agreement of all parties. I don't know whether. Oh, you'd like to say something, Tim? Do you have any objections to those papers?
I'd just like to ask a question, if I may, on the back of that. One assumes those are all relating to the festival being held in the castle and not at the rugby club, so a different site. So how relevant will they be?
They are related to last year and at the castle, but they are just sort of a guide as to the sort of policies that will be put in place for this year's event if this licence is granted, etc.
Thank you.
Are you happy for those to be shared out? Members, do you have any objections to those papers being, how big is it? It's just I wonder whether if the objectors are happy, maybe if you go through them and you're summing up, and then we can have a copy of it so members can consider them fully during their deliberations.
Yeah.
Whether that would be agreeable.
Yes, that's okay.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay.
More on residents. So if the applicants seek to make an additional submission, I would equally like to submit action governance via risk assessment to be treated in the same way.
Do you have any objection to that? No, members, do you have any objection to that document being produced?
No, no objection.
Ms. Moore, I presume you're referring to that in your representations. Are you happy for members to have a copy of that when they deliberate? Thank you.
Thank you all. Disclosable pecuniary interest. Members are reminded to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed which is not included in the register of interest. If, following the declaration of interest, any party feels a member's decision making may be prejudiced, they should make it known. The hearing may then need to be adjourned so the committee can be reappointed. Are there any such?
None from me. No.
None from you?
None.
No. Okay. So can the licensing officers introduce themselves and present their report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So I'm the Public Protection Officer, Ross O'Neill, working within the licensing team and responsible.
You get closer to the mic, maybe.
Any better?
No.
Stop working.
No.
Is this one working?
Yeah.
Better.
Wherever it is.
Okay, I'll start again. So, that's echoing now. I'm Ross O'Neill, Public Protection Officer, working in the licensing team and responsible for today's report. Thank you, Chair, and good morning all. So we're here today to consider a new premises licence application.
I wonder if Mr O'Neill sits on the end, then he's directing his voice out. That might help.
I think if you just face and see what help. Stand up.
Okay, good morning. Any better? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you, Chair. Third time lucky. So I'm Ross O'Neill, I'm the Public Protection Officer working with the licensing team and responsible for today's reports. So here today to consider a new premises licence application applied for by Ludlow Rugby Football Club Limited, and that's for Ludlow Rugby Football Club. You'll find in your report that Appendix A and B of the report are a map and photographs to set the scene for yourselves. The clubhouse is west of Ludlow, set back off the Linney and borders the River Team. The Riverside playground is to the south of the clubhouse, with residential properties to the east on the Linney and the upper Linney. The club currently has a club certificate and have applied for a new premises licence to allow public events, including the Ludlow Spring Festival, wedding parties and craft fairs. The club certificate will be surrendered if a premises licence is granted. You've also got Appendix C and D. These are in the report, and that's the application and the new plan submitted during consultation. So just note that's the new consultation plan. So originally that was a lot larger. It's been reduced during consultation. You'll also find timings, activities, and the area applied for within those appendices. During consultation, Trade Standards, Environmental Protection, the police and the licensing authority acting as responsible authority submitted representations. The applicant has agreed to all additional conditions as set out in paragraphs 6 and 7 of my report, and there's no representations outstanding of any of the authorities today. However, there were 51 other persons who submitted representations against the applicant. Although not entirely linked to the 4 objectives, there is concern of a potential noise nuisance from outdoor regular entertainment, the increase in hours and the number of festivals, events that could be held at the club on this licence application. The representations, have all been given the benefit of the doubt as per the 182 guidance to allow amplification of their concerns today. So you'll notice that Appendix E is a map of those representations, and then Appendix F 1 to 51 are the representations, the applications, and as I've already stated, there's one has been withdrawn, Ludlow Town Clerk Gina Wildings. We also then had 27 other persons' representations, but these are in support of the application. They believe the application is positive for the club and the community, and then you'll find those at Appendix G, and that's numbers 1 to 27 for those comments. Additional items were also received since, and you'll find those attached to the agenda, which came in after my report was submitted. These include a letter off the agent to all persons that submitted representations, and also an additional document off one of the objectors. So to clarify, it's a new premises licence application to replace the current club certificate, which currently limits public access. It's to licence indoors and outdoors for sales of alcohol and to have regulated entertainment. And it's also to allow events and festivals. So the reason you're here today is to consider and determine the application, and to do this, you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to promote the 4 licensing objectives. Any representations, the 182 guidance of the Licensing Act 2003 and Shropshire Council's licensing policy 2019 to 2024. You then may grant the application in full or in part, subject to such conditions deemed necessary and appropriate to the 4 licensing objectives. You can also refuse if deemed appropriate for the 4 licensing objectives, and you also need to remember that your decision must be justified and provide supporting evidence after to all involved, and the decision can be appealed within 21 days of all parties receiving the decision. That's it for me now, Chair.
Right, you'll now have an opportunity to ask relevant questions of the licensing officer. And the order in which I'll take questions is firstly responsible authorities, other persons, the applicant, and then the committee. So any comments from any responsible authorities?
We don't have any responsible authorities present today, Chair.
Thank you. Any other persons? No?
Yes, please.
Right, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
I'm just like to ask the question why the responsible authorities are not present to present their own findings and be questioned on those. I don't know if that's relevant to this point, but that's a question for the licensing officer.
Yeah, because the representations obviously were received by all the authorities. They've withdrawn the representations and decided that they're not here today to ask any questions. Obviously, if there is questions, the subcommittee here, and if there's something that they can't answer and no one else can answer, obviously that would have to be taken into consideration.
So there's no opportunity to ask other responsible authority any questions. Okay, that's okay. Thank you. That's interesting.
Right, we'll move on to the applicant.
Karina Harris from Lanyon Badger Solicitors, representing the club. Some of what I'd like to say is answering some of the objections that have been raised.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt you, do you have any questions of Mr O'Neill? That's right.
No, sorry, I thought you'd finished that.
No, sorry, we just need to finish that bit and then the committee may have questions of it and then we'll move on to you.
No questions of Ross.
Thank you. You, any from the committee? No.
None at the moment.
Right, thank you. Right, can the applicant introduce themselves and present their application?
Sorry, Karina Harris from Lanyon Badger Solicitors on behalf of the rugby club. The club intends to continue to operate predominantly as a rugby club. There's been a lot of communication sort of implying that the club is intending to be something that it's not. It's a sports club, it's a rugby club, it's going to continue to be predominantly a rugby club. It has no intentions of becoming an event venue it's going to be a rugby club and a sports venue. I believe there's no objections regarding the proposals for the indoors of the premises. I think the objections relate predominantly to the outside area. I'm sort of making that assumption in what I'd like to put to you. Currently, they have a club premises, a club license, which supplies for supply of alcohol, performance of dance, live music and recorded music. The hours currently are Monday to Sunday, 11 a.m. till 1 a.m. and Sunday, 11 till midnight. The new license, which is the premises license, will be 8 a.m. So it's starting earlier, but it will still be till 1. But on a Sunday, we've said 1 o'clock as well. So it's an extra hour on a Sunday. The reason it's starting earlier is the Spring Festival hours start at 9 o'clock in the morning. What frequently happens at these sort of events is once the trade set up their stands, etc., they then go and have a look around before it's open to the general public, each other's stands, and sometimes you get trade sales then. So that is why we're asking for an hour before it's open to the general public to allow trade to trade sales. The hours, as I said, finishing time have been the same as they have, except for on a Sunday when we've asked for an extra hour to keep it in line with the rest of the week. The reason for the change is the club was approached by the Spring Festival to transfer their festival in the spring from what is currently the castle to the rugby club. I'd like to ask Mr. David here to explain why they made that decision, because I think that has been a little bit confused as well. And then I'll continue afterwards if that's okay.
Thank you. David Chandler, Chair, Ludlow Food and Drink Festival. The Food Festival, which is a not-for-profit, volunteer-led organisation, is not an applicant in this matter, but the future of our spring event seems to have precipitated this process. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to say something about the background, in particular our decision to move the event from the castle, about which there have been a number of unhelpful rumours. As context, I'd first like to make the point that we have 3 revenue-earning events in the course of the year: the spring event in May, the Manulonga in August, and the main food festival, which is nearing its 30th birthday in September. I would also point out that we've had large cost increases signalled by many of our suppliers affecting all 3 events, and have to try to calculate the effect of the economic situation on potential visitors, for whom each of our events is a discretionary spend. Like so much of the hospitality sector, we find ourselves in a vice-like grip of increased costs and potentially reduced income. Traditionally, we've used the castle for the May and September events on a rent that reflected footfall, which made it a variable cost with a direct relationship to the business we were doing. About 18 months ago, the castle owners informed us that they wanted to move to a fixed charge based on their loss of revenue as a result of having us there. In fairness to them, they offered us a 3-year escalator to the new charge, and that is why we were able to remain at the castle last May. The effect on the September festival was minimal, as the 2 formulae came out much the same. But the May event has a much lower footfall, 6,000 to 6,500 over 3 days, and this was simply not sustainable on the new basis. Let me stress that contrary to rumour, the September Food Festival is not affected. There is no intention that it should be, nor any wish to move from a location that has become synonymous with the festival. And if anybody watched the recent BBC programmes about the Food Festival, you'll see how closely the Food Festival and the castle are aligned in terms of the image to the general public. Similarly, let me publicly stress that there has been no falling out with the castle. We fully recognise the need for them to make responsible business decisions. We are grateful for the year of grace provided by the cost escalator to explore alternative arrangements, and we have looked at a variety. As some of you will know, the rugby club has provided visitor parking and camping for the festivals, and we have had other smaller collaborations with them. In the course of our search, they agreed to an alternative use of their ground as long as their financial situation was not affected. Again, let me confront the rumour mill and stress the fact that we were not lured away by the club. And as far as I am aware, they are simply not sustaining a reduction in income through this change, but using their property for a different purpose. Whilst I'm talking about unhelpful rumours, can I also address the idea that there will be a financial hit to the community from this change of location? The choice was not between the castle and the rugby club. It was between an event and no event. And whilst there might be a marginal effect on the economic vibrancy of the town from changing to the rugby club, there would have been a much greater one if we'd had to cancel. We had a thorough review of the possibilities, and this was the only option without moving from Ludlow. As it is, we are budgeting for a loss this year, but have decided to go ahead as this is seen as a primarily local event, whereas the September event draws people from all around the country, indeed all around the world. It's the start to the festival calendar, and many exhibitors and vendors already have these regular dates in their calendars. We are doing all we can to ensure that this event does not go the same way as the Shakespeare Festival and the Medieval Fair. This brings me to my next point. We have been challenged by various people about our reserves, which they say could sustain the difference in price between the 2 venues. We are committed to ensuring that we can cope with a repeat of an event such as COVID or Storm Arwen, and still remain a going concern. Whilst we may use our reserves to deal with a one-off emergency such as one of these, it is not right to use them to fund an otherwise unsustainable cost structure into the future. We are able to make this choice because we are a voluntary body focused on our events, in the belief that they are good for the local community and local economy, we are not focused on making profits. For this reason, a number of the rumours circulating, including from people who should know better, are particularly hurtful, as we never take shortcuts. For example, we have used SIA registered security firms since 2011, and yet we and the world are told that we use volunteers for security duties. We have produced the various documents required by the council, which we referred to earlier, and other authorities every year for almost 30 years, including the whole life of the spring event. And we have been complimented on many occasions about how comprehensive those policy documents are. And yet we have not taken the safety implications of the new site into account, or traffic movements, which in point of fact will be greatly reduced this year. Anyone can run an event like this without making the provisions for safety of the site and the build, toilets, fencing, professionally erected tents, thorough clean up afterwards, etc., etc. But for instance, security this year will cost us £6,500 for the spring event alone, in addition to our retained health and safety advisors, who, as it happens, have just been taken on as the advisors by the castle. By all means, object to the application. But those of you who are trading in these groundless allegations about the way the food festival does business, please stop. Let the matter be decided on the facts and the facts alone.
Thank you very much, David. Did you want to continue, Corinne?
Yes, please. Yes. The club was approached by the committee to transfer the event to the rugby club, and as a result of that, the club had to look at whether or not they could continue with their current licence, which they could not. The club licence, for those that don't understand, a club licence is for members and their guests only. So a public event such as the festival, it is not appropriate for. So it's just clarifying why some of the objections have mentioned this, and sort of I just want to explain why they can't continue with their current licence with a public event. As you can tell from what David has already said, they're very professional how they run and operate, producing masses of policy documents that cover subjects like alcohol, drugs, fire policy, emergency contingency, wind and severe weather policy, lost and found children policies, noise policies, event safety policies, and traffic policies. As I said, these are here. They're examples of last year's, just as examples. Obviously, they've not done ones for this year as yet, because they don't want to go to the cost if this licence gets turned down. The Spring Festival is an important event that benefits the local economy. If it does not go ahead, it'll be a big loss to the town. The events at the club help support the running cost of the club. Whilst members pay subscriptions, this is not enough to cover the overheads completely. The bar and functions held there help considerably. The club has had to apply for a COVID bounce back loan and a loan from the Rugby Football Union. Obviously, these loans will need to be paid back. Temporary event notices is something that's been mentioned several times in the objectors' comments as to why they can't apply for temporary event notices. Temporary event notices are not the answer in this instance, because they only cover events for 499 people maximum, and that includes staff and event organisers. So it's not appropriate in this instance, which is one of the why we've had to apply for a full licence. The club also wants to be able to allow members to have functions at the event, at the venue, like wedding parties, birthday parties, etc. Most of the guests that would be attending them would be family and friends. They obviously won't be members of the club, and therefore that's another reason why it needs to be a public line. Whilst the main reason for applying for the Spring Festival and at the club is for apply for the licence is the Spring Festival, but they also would like to run other events like a family fun day, summer ball, rugby sevens competition, craft fairs, vintage rallies. The application has been served on all the responsible authorities and displayed in the normal way. The responsible authorities, 3 of them, raised objections initially. Through negotiations with them, they have agreed with the club. The police have agreed an additional 11 conditions, environmental protection an additional 6 conditions, trading standards an additional 9 conditions, and public protection an additional 3, which you've got, and I'm not going to read out in any way. The main conditions agree regarding the outside area is for only 3 large events per year. 3 large events being those of over 500 attendees, plus 8 smaller events. This is not less than it's much less than the club wanted originally, but have agreed to those conditions with responsible authorities to try to alleviate some of the concerns for the local residents. The responsible authorities have been happy with what we've agreed, and they're not here today because they're happy with what the proposals are in place now. To address some of the concerns raised in the objections, I've tried to I've read all the objections and tried to list them as the main objections that are mentioned several times. One of the main concerns seems to be extra traffic and parking. This isn't going to be the case that there's going to be extra traffic. There should actually be less traffic this year, because in previous years there has been camping provided on the rugby club's ground and car parking on the days of the event, which has been approximately 500 per day of the festival. Cars coming down the Linney, going to the rugby club, parking and going to the castle. Obviously, because the Spring Festival will be taking place actually at the rugby club, subject to your agreement, the cars will no longer be allowed to park there. The only cars that will be allowed to park there is blue badge disabled drivers only. Estimates on this is between about 50 and 60 disabled will be travelling up and down that road, and all the other vehicles that have parked in the past will not be going there, so there will be at least 400 less traffic going up and down that road. The narrow road going up to the club, they say, is single lane. It is single lane when cars are parked on the one side. As you will all be aware that frequently cars park up the one side of the lane and cause blockage. Obviously, when the festival's on, no parking will be allowed up that lane, so it'll be two-way traffic up and down that lane. Town trade being impacted, as David said, that it shouldn't impact them because the buses that are mentioned, there's usually only between 2 and 6 maximum buses that attend, probably only 2 that turn up. They will be dropping off in the town, not actually at the club. And then there will be signage for people to walk to the club from there. So the trade in the town hopefully won't be impacted from that side of things. The playground on the Linney, there is concerns that the cars will be parking there and that will be used by people going to the festival. My understanding is that currently that is used by many car owners who actually park there to work in the town. So the parking there is not often available for people who are going to the playground. It's usually taken up early on in the morning by people who are working or shopping in the town. That is totally not the responsibility of the rugby club at all. Also, that area has been concerned about bottles and cans being dropped there from the event. This has been going on for years there, where youngsters go drinking in there in the evenings and at weekends, as youngsters do. And in fact, the rugby club has frequently had to clear up from their grounds bottles and cans that have been thrown over into their ground. Concerns about lights. The lighting, I understand there's been a lot of issue with the tennis club about lighting and the local residents. I can assure the residents that there is no plans to change the lighting that is currently at the rugby club. Noise late at night. Conditions have been agreed about signage and asking people to leave the grounds quietly. When the festival's on, it finishes at cleared up by about 9 o'clock, David?
Yeah, we finished between 8:30 and. Sorry, we finished between 8:30 and 9, and then we would hope to have everybody cleared from the site by 9:30, which is what happens at the castle.
So that will be one of the 3 events, large events that we're talking about each year. So, I mean, that will finish a lot earlier, but anyway. So the noise won't be going on late, and the number of events has now been considerably scaled back from what we originally applied for. Environmental impact, food safety, hedgehog rescue and damage to pitches, value of homes, all the comments that have been made which aren't really under the licensing objective, so I'm not going to bother commenting on those. I think that's basically sums up all I'm going to say, really.
Thank you very much.
At this stage, no. See if you have any questions to ask me or the President, Andy Wright, please do so, but nothing more.
Thank you. Any comments?
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Any other persons' comments?
Glenn Mayo. Just an observation and a question, if I may. I think if I recognise the rugby club's need for a public licence, and if the licence application was solely to serve the needs of the Spring Beer Festival, then we might be having a very different discussion today. I just would like some further clarification on the 3 large events being proposed in the revisions to this licence. I wasn't quick enough to make notes to what you said, but you talked about a rugby sevens tournament and 1 or 2 other things. I'm just questioning whether you need a licence for more than 500 for any of those events that you're describing. Could you remind me what they are again, please, is what I'm saying.
Yes, Colin Spanner. We have in mind, as Mr. Mayor has said, a sevens tournament. Anyone who follows rugby will know that over the country, sevens tournaments, obviously 7-a-side rugby, take place in many, many places. They're very popular. You normally have them at the end of the season, so late spring, early summer, and you invite a number of clubs to come along and play for the 1-day 7-a-side tournament on a knockout basis. There could be 16 clubs, for example, 16 sevens, do the maths, plus supporters, plus a few reserves. That may well take the event over 500 people. The other event we have in mind is, in fact, we had one last year, which would be a summer family fun day, inviting children, of course, with their parents, bouncy castles, sporting events, barbecue. As I said, we had a very successful one last year, but the only bar we used was the one indoors, so we didn't need a license outdoors. But if we're going to have another one with the appropriate license, then having a bar outside would help with footfall and what have you. So they are 2 events. Of course, if you grant the license for the Spring Beer Festival, and that is a success, We'd like that to happen on an annual basis, and of course it might attract other events like the Ludlow Fringe Festival to have an event, jazz festival, whatever it might be, done at the club as well. And again, there are likely to be more than 500 people attending those events. So we're leaving the door open for events. Of course, we can't book anything unless we get the license, so there's no point going much further ahead. But there are events that we think will benefit, of course, the club, otherwise we wouldn't run them, but also the town in general.
Thank you for that.
May I come back to that? Is that okay? Clearly, some of the events that you propose would be more satisfactorily accepted by the local community than others, and whether you would be prepared to list such events in a, I don't know if this is possible, in a license application, then that might be helpful. So, for example, a Sevens tournament, Family Fun Day.
It's very hard to actually list and specify exactly what it is, because at the moment there is nothing firm booked in. So it's just a case of leaving the doors open. I mean, I don't know, but would you be prepared to actually post signs to say that this is what you're proposing on certain days? Would that be helpful to the objectors and the local residents, that if you had a notification prior to the event that as what's happening on what day?
One assumes any event of numbers over 500 are going to have to meet all the safety advisory group recommendations anyway, much in the same way as obviously the Spring Beer Festival will, because it's a proven event. So yes, there would need to be notification of the event. I think that's got to be 3 months prior to it taking place if it's over 500, and I think you've got to then publish all the agreed recommendations against SAG regulations 2 months prior to that event. So if that is what you propose to do, then that would be helpful, of course.
Well, I don't know if you've read the conditions that we've signed up to, but the club has actually agreed to the SAG regulations as part of their conditions that they've negotiated with responsible authorities. So those have been agreed, and that will be a condition of the licence. So, you know, they must comply with that for all events over 500.
Yeah, thank you. As I say, if we were just talking about the Spring Beer Festival, we might be having a different debate, but thank you.
Chair, for me, David Chancellor, Food Festival. All parties, I'm not pointing a finger at anyone, and I hope I'm not making a mess out of a Malden about this, seem to have gone into referring to the Spring Beer Festival. The beer is one aspect of a number of things we do, and given that this is being recorded and broadcast, can I be clear, it is not simply a beer festival.
Question from Mr. Clark and the committee chair, two different questions. Mr. Clark, what other venues did you explore for the Spring Festival?
Sorry, can I just have your name, please?
Abbey Lock. Sorry.
Sorry, my name again for the record is David Chancellor. Yes, we looked at everything we could think of in the town. We use a field running down to the river on the other side of the Linney for our exhibitor car park. That we considered that early on, and it just seemed too steep a site to use. We considered the football club, but the football club is so far out of town as to make some of your objections actually relevant. That probably would take away from the contribution to the local economy. We considered the racecourse, which is even more a case, and we have very close relationships with the Discovery Centre in Craven Arms. But the whole point about this event is to do something around the Ludlow economy, and we could have shifted it elsewhere. There's a huge field on the outskirts of Tenbury, just in Shropshire, where they hold the Tenbury Festival. Can't pretend we actually looked at that, but if we were prepared to take the step of moving out of Ludlow, that would have been on a short list. If anybody, even at this late stage, can provide me with a flat field near the centre of Ludlow, we would certainly, for future years, consider that. It's probably too late in the day for this year, but, you know, as honest as I can be about this, because somebody might be hiding one away somewhere, there is no other suitable ground near Ludlow, which is why I say, and some people have sort of raised the issue, if this doesn't go through, then let me be absolutely clear, there is no way we can organise the spring event in Ludlow this year other than on the rugby club's premises.
Unless the castle change their rates.
I'm not sure even now at this stage we could do that.
Yeah.
But you know, again, one of the rumours that keeps going around is that somehow the food festival and the castle have fallen out. I absolutely accept and accepted at the time that we have had an unchanged formula for many, many years. They have a business which they need to look to. I absolutely accept that. The fact that we are the losers as far as the Spring Festival is concerned is really unfortunate, and I wish it hadn't happened. But there's no resentment on our part that the castle have taken exactly the sorts of decisions that we've got to take.
No, thank you. You've answered my questions. That's fine.
Is that yes, we could subsidise it for a couple of years from our reserves, but after a couple of years we would have no reserves, and then there would be no Spring Festival, and it would probably take the September Festival down with it.
Sure. Just a question now to the committee chair. Can you just give us a point of clarity about the camping? Have I misunderstood this? But are you saying there's going to be more camping in the grounds of the rugby club? I've probably misunstood, but I'm grateful for that.
Jump in and be absolutely clear. There will be no camping because it's being used for this purpose. Hence the reduction in vehicles.
But I mean, not just the Spring Festival, but in other events.
Well, no, because we're wanting to keep the September Festival as similar to what it's always been, and there's no reason why that should be changed, then I could see no reason why the car parking doesn't continue on the Linney for that purpose, but that purpose alone.
I understood there
Thank
was.
you. Can I have your name,
sorry,
please?
Maggie Dean, local resident and treasurer of the tennis club. I understand there's also a motor festival which you're running at the same time. Is that correct? I saw that on your website.
Yeah, traditionally the Marches Transport Festival has been part of the Spring Festival, and if we go back to the issue about fire, we, for instance, had to spend £1,000 on having a fire engine in the castle in order to facilitate that. I hope that will be much easier and maybe a saving to us in the new site. And if we get the license, if the rugby club get the license today, we will explore that. But yes, the intention is to have the veteran cars there for usually a day.
Does that not mean there will be more traffic then? Because you'll be bringing in these cars on trailers up the narrow track.
No, they never come on trailers.
Well, there'll be traffic. There will be traffic.
No, accept that, but I'm just trying to make the point. They never come on trailers. The whole point is to arrive on the Sunday morning on block, having gone away, some of them the night before. Yeah, no, that's right. But compared to the vehicle movements accounted for by the camping and the car park, this is minuscule.
Roughly how many vehicles, as a matter of interest, roughly?
God, I've done a lot of research anticipating questions. I think, and I don't know where I get this from, so please don't hold me to it. I think it's around 60, but historically that's been because the site has been constrained at the castle, and we don't yet know what the effects of what land we can use at the rugby club will have on that. It may make it possible to have a few more. It may actually mean there are a few less. You know, we seriously have not progressed on any assumption that this license will be granted, because it's just not worth the effort. What we will do is proceed as closely as we can to what we've done historically.
I'd just like to point out that none of this wasn't mentioned earlier. So,
Chair, I think we're straying away from the basis of the licensing application now.
Of course.
I was just about to bring us back to the 4 licensing objectives. Traffic flows, etc., don't come into this application, I'm afraid. It's just those 4 licensing objectives that we have to look at. Okay, thank you.
I just think they were trying to clarify the point of they thought it under public safety. They mentioned in their objections under public safety the traffic side of it. So just to clarify from trying to get at.
Mancini. And my name is Hazel Mancini, and I live in the Linney. And I don't expect maybe any of you have actually been down the Linney and so understand.
Can I just stop? Sorry to interrupt you. Is this a question for the applicant?
The question is regard to the safety, and you're saying, and the gentleman there said you're not interested in traffic flows at the moment, but you presumably are interested that in the access road, which is not mentioned in any of the information that has been given out so far, that when you come off Corf Street into the Linney, you have to, cars, and I do it on a weekly basis, cars have to mount the pavement to actually pass each other because it is a one-track road and it is extremely narrow, and you in fact have to back into people's private driveways on occasion to actually pass cars. We do this on a normal basis, at a weekly basis, and it's usually a quiet road. But when you've got all this extra traffic and extra pedestrians, there is something called the Priory Cemetery, which is a shortcut to the Tesco's and a shortcut to the station, and people use it.
I'm going to have to stop you there. We are looking at a licence to be granted to the premises known as the rugby club.
But you have to get to the premises.
That is our only objective today, based on the licensing objectives. So any case you're making about traffic, I'm afraid I can't consider.
I'm talking about pedestrians. When cars have to mount the pavement to actually pass each other, they are going on.
I would say this is a highways issue. The police haven't brought it up. Our highways department haven't brought it up. So consequently, and it doesn't come within our brief. I'm sorry, but these are the rules we have to go by.
So how do we bring this up?
The applicant has already stated that they've signed up to the SAG guidelines, or the SAG, forgive me, I don't think the guidelines, which deals with traffic management prior to any event taking place. So if the SAG decide that their traffic management plans aren't up to scratch, the event won't go ahead. But that has been dealt with within the application.
Can I ask?
I'm sorry, if you're addressing the meeting, do it through a microphone, please, and identify yourself. Thank you.
James Moore, I'm one of the local residents. Just to step back a bit, I think you might think we're a bunch of killjoys and NIMBYs. That couldn't be further from the truth. A lot of us represented here today are officers of clubs. We're very community based and we understand our legal obligations. And that's why we're here today, because we have concerns.
Thanks for that. Can I just clarify? At this moment in time, we're just asking questions of the applicant based on what they've said. You will get your opportunity to put forward whatever you want to say.
Understand it. We've talked about highways here and public safety. I would just like to question whether this has been raised to highways. I raised this to, I think his name is Alan or Alex Postlethwaite, and he said to me he was not aware of this application. He hadn't been consulted. So I'd just like to raise the point, has this actually been raised to these representative bodies? And equally, do they actually understand the local infrastructure so that they can make a judgment on public safety grounds and nuisance? And the reason that's important is the beautiful pack that Ross put together with the street view images around the entrance to the rugby club show the best part of the Linney. Now, if you go to other parts of the Linney, so this lady's point.
Mr. Moore, you're straying into giving your submissions now. I can ask you to limit it just to questions.
Yes, so the question is really about the due diligence that's been done around this application by the rugby club to understand if they can meet the requirements of public safety nuisance like sound prior to putting this application in.
When we submit this application, we have a responsibility to serve it on the responsible authorities. Those responsible authorities are child protection, fire service, police, environmental health, public protection, public nuisance. They all get consulted. They all get a copy of the application. The trading standards as well. They're all the ones that are the responsible authorities as determined by the Licensing Act 2003. We have consulted with them. We've liaised with them. We've come to these extra conditions with them. So that is part of a standard policy, and those are our requirements to do under the Licensing Act. And it's clear we have done by the fact that we've had all these comments being made.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move now to the committee members.
Yeah, I've got one question. You say there's no parking on the rugby club now. So if the event goes on, if this is passed, where will they park then?
Yeah, we also have car parking at the cricket club, which is obviously the second choice for a lot of people because it's further away than the rugby club. And overwhelmingly, as I say, one of the reasons we really do want to go ahead is that unlike the main festival, we understand, we believe that the May Festival is seen as very much more a local event. So the amount of vehicles coming into Ludlow for it is much less than the September Festival, and they will, I'm sure, go to the cricket club and walk the extra bit that requires. But obviously, if you've got a choice between the cricket club and the rugby club, you'll go to the rugby club first.
There's also the park and ride in Ludlow, which people can park at, and the bus takes them into Ludlow and drops them off as well.
Right, thank you for that. I've got another question about you're on about doing the Spring Festival at the rugby club if you get this passed. So the other two festivals, you'll be stepping at the castle, will they?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the most irritating bits of the rumour mill is that somehow we are not committed to being at the castle, whether we like it or not. After, I think it's about 28 years of the 30 years of the life of the festival, the images of the castle and the food festival are so intertwined. There's no intention. I can't imagine how we could ever leave there. Now, in terms of business, that puts us in a very weak position because they can decide whether they'll have us. But certainly, recent conversations indicate they are very keen to keep the association, and we will stay there for that. The Manulonga is a more flexible event. It's a walk for 800 people through the countryside with local food. It starts in different places. It started at the rugby club for the last couple of years. I don't know whether the rugby club know yet, whether we've told them. We intend to move the start to Craven Arms to the Discovery Centre this year. So it may come back to the rugby club later. Both venues. We've also started at the Ludlow Food Shop as well. The estate have provided us with accommodation. What we look for that is fixed start and stop start and stop positions, so that we only have to put our tents up in 2 or 3 intermediary stops between them. And the Discovery Centre, the rugby club, and the estate are able to provide us with those, so we mix and match those over time.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been listening carefully to the debate here, not knowing Ludlow in detail. It helps to see all the plans and maps and things. And you've answered many of my questions. Possibly the one that's outstanding for me is you revised your request for different opening hours in a recent mailing I've had, so that it says here that you've got 3 large events, 2 of which finish by 9 and 1 by 11. And these smaller events, 1 small events finishing by 11. On the rugby club indoor application, obviously it goes to very early hours of the morning. Do we? So you're accepting a restricted opening times then as a result of all that. It's not likely to be pushed because, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
The hours for the indoor will still be the same as we've applied for.
Right.
So there will be different hours for indoor and for outdoors. So the outdoor events will be restricted to these times of 11 o'clock. But the functions that take place indoors will be until 1 o'clock in the morning, which is what they are currently, except for on Sunday, which is midnight currently.
All right. Yeah. So as regards the objectors or the residents nearby who have concerns, they don't have concerns about the current licence operation indoor. So that shouldn't be a problem going forward.
I can clarify that I have confirmed with is it Rob Boland, I think his name is, the Public Protection Officer, that the club has been there since 1985, and there's been no complaints about noise from the club at all during that time, and there has been no reports to the police of any offences in that time since 1985, and that licence was granted. I've got a date that it was granted. The club licence has been there since 2005.
Right. Thank you. That
under the new Act.
That helps my thinking. Councillor Boddington, in his submission, was concerned about public safety, but obviously that's taken care of with regard to the river and things like that in the play area. That's not a problem at all, in your opinion.
That's all been sorted out with the responsible authorities. They're now happy with it. But if you want to ask specific questions about the spring fair, then I'm sure David could answer that better than me.
Yeah, our intention is to spend a lot of money fencing the sites off from the river. It's the point I keep coming back to. We're a not-for-profit organisation. The only standard we apply to ourselves is, have we done a proper job? And if we can't do a proper job, we will not cut corners. Yeah. So the event will not happen.
Yes, I just thought that to be put on the public record. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to bring in now other people who've made representation, and I'll kick off with Glenn, is it? Carry on.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of presenting to you today. I'd like to put my address in context. My name is Glenn Mayo, and I've been charged with the responsibility of representing the majority of residents in the community closest to Ludlow Rugby Club, and therefore most likely to be affected by this licence application. I've chaired meetings of over 50 residents who have galvanised their feelings in objection to the Rugby Club licence application. Garnering over 50 representations against the applications, the licence committee will be well aware of the strength of feeling. All such representations, of course, have the right of attendance today. For the sake of an efficient and expedient hearing, we decided to limit our attendance to just 9 people, with a handful speaking. Rest assured, however, that whilst their presence is not visible, their support is tangible, and expectation rests with those of us who are here to do justice to their feelings. We feel very fortunate living where we do, enjoying the positive partnerships and facilities of the Bowls and Tennis Club, and indeed seeing and hearing children's play and sporting activity, including rugby, is part of the fabric of our Ludlow life. Living where we do does not come without its challenges, however. The narrow streets down from town to Dinham and on through the Linney are fraught with danger. As pedestrians and car users, extreme care is necessary to negotiate access to and from our properties. It's clear that the Rugby Club have ambition, and to provide junior, mini, colt and senior rugby successfully for the wider Ludlow community is laudable. Indeed, it could be argued that their success in this regard is already secure. Analysis of their financial statements provides evidence of a fiscally sound business, so much so that they recently purchased another piece of land for around £50,000, I'm told, to extend their provision. It's our opinion, then, that there is no risk to their survival by maintaining their current licence restrictions. Such a licence provides the opportunity to serve alcohol from 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. daily, and to have music, dance and other party activities indoors, which limits the invasive impact of noise disturbance, for example. As neighbours, we've lived with this for many years. Just take issue with one point you made there. I personally have made one complaint in the 8 years I've lived on the Linney with respect to a noise nuisance. So I don't know how that's not reached the statistics that you got, but there was just one occasion when it went on beyond the time specified and it was very loud. I can't remember the dates and times on that, but there was one. Anyway, in a nutshell, we can see no reason to extend the current licence, and our objections are as follows. They fall basically into two categories: large festival type events and outdoor parties, for want of a better word. At this point, I want to say that we appreciate the revisions to the original licence application, but regret they don't go far enough. I welcome too the conditions being applied to the licence application by the responsible authorities, whose expertise is appreciated. I do, however, wonder if they've all made a site visit. Regarding large festival type events, it's a pity the castle itself appears to have withdrawn its support for the Spring Beer Plus Festival, which ostensibly prompted this licence application. The castle, of course, containing noise by its very infrastructure. I don't want at this stage to simply read my or other representation forms, but I would like to highlight the salient points that are of serious concern regarding the rugby club hosting festival events where numbers of attendees can exceed 4, 5, 6,000. The safety of children using the play area adjacent to the rugby club will be compromised. Regarding public nuisance, it's obvious that this type of event over a 3-day period will generate levels of noise that will have significant impact on the local community. I will come to the nuisance caused by traffic under public safety. There is a direct correlation between alcohol consumption, volume of public participation, and crime and disorder levels. The risk of trouble, therefore, is enhanced. In an already confined and limited vehicular and pedestrian through route, the challenge of accepting significantly increased volume of traffic will increase the risk of harm to the public. The access road to the rugby club is simply not conducive to maintaining safety. The complexity of reaching the club's site mitigates against the ease of emergency service access and may cause risk to life. Let me now turn to the prospect of smaller events. Assume here we mean those less than 500. By the applicant's own admission, these events are likely to be in the rugby closed season, condensing their availability to the summer months. Imagine then if 8 such events are permitted, we could have a situation where every other weekend, and it's obvious we're talking about weekends here, our local community is going to have to endure party-style events held outdoors until late into the evening, along with all the associated disruption. This is contrary to the protection of a conservation area. Traffic congestion arriving and leaving the site and all the associated noise progressing down a narrow, difficult access and egress route will not only be intolerable, but extremely dangerous. I understand fully the arguments against our concern, and indeed I'm happy to confirm that existing provision activity and events held at the rugby club cause little concern. I do not doubt their ability to manage current levels under the current licence. Interestingly, while there's a map showing the residents which object, there isn't the equivalent of those who support. I wonder why. Perhaps it's easier to support a change which poses no detrimental effect to your residential environment. Reading all the messages submitted in support of the application, they all pretty much centre on what the rugby club provides currently, with the addition of wanting to hold the Spring Beer Plus Festival. In fact, the president of the Ludlow Rugby Club, in his letter of support for the licence application, writes, and I quote, "With the exception of the Spring Festival, I do not foresee any significant change in the size and scale of operation at the rugby club. If this is the case, then why not apply for a licence solely to host the Spring Beer Festival?" I do wish the rugby club well in their ambition to maintain a successful community provision and ask them to consider the impact this application has on the immediate community in which they sit. I believe that in striving to be an event centre rather than a rugby club, they will lose the very identity to which they crave.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Glenn?
Just like to clarify that there is no intention of it becoming predominantly an event venue. It's predominantly a sports venue, and it's going to continue predominantly as a sports venue.
It's not a question, is it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I am councillor for Ludlow North, and that includes this area, both the Linney, and we'll hear from the Cliff, and also the rugby club. Yes. Rather awkward not being at the table. But so I represent them, I represent the businesses and the residents. That doesn't mean that I agree with them or they agree with me. And I think for the latter, I think that is the case at the moment. And as councillors, you'll be aware, that's one of the difficult balancing acts that we have in our role. This application really got off on the wrong foot. And it was initially a huge application, and it was the full Monty. So everything in, all hours, 16 hours a day for 365 days a year. There was no consultation with residents before the licence was submitted, which, you know, it's awkward. Councillors weren't consulted either. It would have been better if that had happened, and there'd have been less angst than we're finding now. Although, as you'll hear, as you are hearing, and as you will hear, there's still a lot of angst about this application. We need to emphasise that although the trigger is the Spring Food Festival, this is not an application for the festival. If it was, it would be easier to decide. It's actually an application for the rugby club. We've heard what the rugby club plan to do, but this licence will be in place, presumably like the castles. Well, the castle's been in place for nearly 40 years, and its licence hasn't changed in that period. We can expect this licence to be in place for decades, unless there is a reason to revoke it. And we have to think about what potentially could be done rather than what they're planning to do. And I want to emphasise that point. Although, I fully accept that this is being done in good faith by them. The police requested a number of conditions as to public safety. These conditions are not quite aligned. And so, for example, public safety actually asked that a reference to the safety advisory group is triggered at 1,000 people at any one time, whereas the police trigger SAI involvement and other actions when there's a total of 500 people, and those two aren't aligned. And I think we should align them and make one threshold, because I think that would be a lot clearer for everybody concerned. Personally, I'd like to see the trigger at 500, and that there will be a reference to the safety advisory group at that point. And in some way, that means some of the other conditions aren't perhaps necessary because they could be negotiated with SAG. And again, I think that's just a better approach to this application. Sorry, just reading my notes. As I said, this application got off on the wrong foot. In many ways, if this had been a temporary event notice, a 10, to cover the food festival only, the Spring Festival, then I don't think there'd have been this level of problem or objection. And what's more, that would have acted as a test. It would mean that residents can experience it, and we'll obviously get feedback from those. I'm perfectly prepared to do a survey of residents after an event to get reaction. That public protection can be evolved to assessing the event, and then we get the experience.
Whereas what we have is something that's going to go on for decades. And I don't know if it's quite within the committee's power today to change the license to a temporary license by an effect, granting it only for 1 year, so that we can assess how it works. And then we'll have the evidence, then we'll have the data, which means if it's not as bad as the
Councillor Boddington, can I just interrupt you on a point of law? Once the licence is granted, it's granted. It's not for a temporary period. It would be, and like you said, until it is revoked or it's brought in for review and variations are made to it. I don't want for you to go on a false errand by talking about temporary licensing, but it can only be granted. Once it's granted, it is granted.
Can't you do a temporary event notice?
That's up for the applicants to decide, but as the applicant said at the beginning, that's not suitable for this event under their current licence. It has been discussed already this morning.
Well, thank you for that clarification. In which case, I would propose that the committee reject this application and the applicants come back with a temporary event notice, just for the Spring Festival.
Councillor Boddington, as I've just said, the applicant made it clear at the beginning of her submissions that that's not possible because of the numbers involved. So that's why we're here today for this application.
Okay, I stand corrected. This is going to be a difficult decision for the committee to make. I wish you luck.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Boddington? No. Okay.
Chair, sorry, I wasn't quite sure. Sorry, I probably lost track of the process. I did want to ask a question of Glenn, if that's possible. Glenn Mayo, who spoke before Councillor Boddington. Sorry. So afterwards we can ask questions of all speakers. Yeah. That's fine. Thank you.
Keith Bell, I'm the president of the Bulls and Tennis Club, also a resident just across the river at Cliff Park. The rugby club sits in an amphitheatre. We are the open end of that amphitheatre. Any noise comes across the river. From what I'm hearing, we're going to have, if the licence is granted, we're going to have an awful lot more noise coming across until 1 o'clock in the morning. That's not acceptable. I share the considerations that Glenn has put forward. Having thousands of people walking down the Linney with vehicle traffic as well constitutes a serious threat to health. I just cannot see that it's an appropriate site to have. Technically, it may be possible. Appropriately, it is not. But my main concern, other than sharing the residents' concerns, is the noise. We will have the benefit of the full noise, sometimes up to 1 o'clock. And if it's every weekend during the summer, it's just not acceptable, that level of noise. Most of us on the Cliff Park, we can't live there unless we're over 50. So we're moving on a little in years. And I think that will be detrimental to our mental health if we're losing sleep. Not sure how many residents stay up till 1 o'clock at night, but I guess very few.
Thank you. Any comment?
If I just clarify that I think he's misunderstood a couple of points there. One is the 1 o'clock is only for inside, as it is currently.
Yeah.
So inside the clubhouse, as it currently is until 1 o'clock in the morning, that should not change from what you currently experience. So they don't think there's an issue with the current noise levels. The outside events, the maximum the outside events could go on to is 1 p.m., sorry. And that is only for 2 events per year of over 500 people.
Right.
So it's only 2 events per year that would be doing that, plus the 8 small events.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be until 1 a.m. in the morning, except for the inside events.
But there will be more of them. And of a larger scale.
At the moment, the only one that is booked in is the one that's mentioned as the Spring Festival. The 3 events are
with respect
possibilities. But
whether you've got any booked in or not, the license allows you to have more.
the license has not been granted as yet. It's subject to being
Well,
granted.
the application for the license.
We have scaled it back from 365 days a year, as you objected to it, to what we've currently agreed with responsible authorities of the 3 large events and 8 small events.
Yeah, Chair, do you want me to step in? The
licensing officer, please.
The application, I think you need to refer to 634.634 of the report. So although the festivals have come forward, there isn't, by the looks of it, there's any time submitted by the applicant to say when they would be. So I know there's been discussion today about them finishing 9, clearing the site at 9:30. That doesn't appear that's going to be a case on the licence. However, if you look at 634, the Environmental Protection Officer has requested conditions. So if granted today, and obviously with the powers that you've got, if you agree with it, the outdoor area must be cleared of patrons by 11 o'clock and remain clear until the end of trading. And then you've also got the condition about external areas in relation to alcohol in the smoking areas. That's condition 3. And then we've got all windows and doors should be closed. So there is no specific times by the looks in relation to events, but there is conditions put forward by public nuisance, public protection in relation to public nuisance about the outdoor area being cleared by 11 o'clock, if that helps and clarifies a little bit.
Can I just can I make the point also? The event may close at a particular time, but people leaving, slamming their car doors after having a good time will be, again, it spreads the extent of the license.
Right, thank you. I'm going to move us on now. You'll have an opportunity to ask any relevant questions of those who have made representations. And the order...
the objector. 2 more objectors to speak.
I've only got the list here. They've all been.
There's some on the list that weren't going to speak originally, unless there's things they wanted to speak about that hasn't been mentioned. There should be 2.
Okay. Is that to repeat what's already been said, or?
It shouldn't be. That's why they weren't on the list.
Right.
So it should be new items.
Thank you. So who else wishes to speak?
Already spoken. James Moore, I'm one of the residents. I'm also involved in running clubs with significant safety aspects to them. So I'm very aware of Health and Safety at Work Act, Section 37, etc. The key points that I want to raise are twofold, and they're to do with safety. The first one, so this is public safety. The first one relates to the access to the site. And the second one relates to mixing people and vehicles. So, I think when we, as a community, first looked at this application, we're supportive of clubs. We want clubs to succeed for all the community benefit that they bring. But considering the area, I think we all felt uneasy. And the reason I asked earlier about due diligence and what work the club had done before submitting this application really plays to that. So, you know, I talked to some people in the events industry and I did research, and why we were uneasy became very, very clear. The principal issue of this site, and while it's safe for sport, you know, it is a playing field. And as we've heard, it has been since 1985. But as a site for large numbers of people, it is completely unsafe. And that is down to the access. What is known as Green Linney. Green Linney is 4.64 metres wide at its narrowest, and it's 123 metres long. Now, for designing events, this should be part of the pre-planning because it limits absolutely what you can do from a health and safety perspective. And for that, I'm referring to the authority. So this is the government publication for fire risk assessment, open air events and venues. So it's the authority on this. And what it does, it gives you a series of metrics to define how the site can be used and the number of people that can attend. Now that dimension of 4.64 metres is critical because it defines the maximum number of people you can have on the site. There's a formula, and the formula will vary depending on the makeup of the site. But for simplicity, the number is 5,058 people that you could have on that site. So you have to manage it round it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I have provided you with a letter that covers the majority of this. But let me read a couple of paragraphs from this, which is the authority. So this is public safety. So it says every venue should be provided with exits that are sufficient for the number of people present with respect to their width, number and siting. Now in this particular case, it's worth remembering that there is only one access. So this particular access is your escape path to the final exit onto the Linney. There is no other route. Now, what this document says is, so if you think there's only this one route, 4.68 metres wide, so you have to consider it is the critical pinch point of the whole area. So it has to provide capacity for people arriving to go to the event, 123 metres down this path, people leaving, and equally vehicles. Now, I understand from what you've said, you would, in the case of the Transport Festival, you'd move the vehicles in at the start of the day and you would move them out so they don't conflict with people. So there are mitigations. But then think of what happens in an emergency and people want to leave that site. You could have 5,000 people on it and they're all going down that Linney. But the issue is, what happens if emergency vehicles arrive at the same time? How is that going to work? Because you're going to have emergency vehicles faced with a crowd coming in the other direction. Now, you could consider mitigations by, let's divide it into two and put a fence, a metre wide or half a metre wide, down the middle. Now, that will reduce the maximum number of people that you can have on the site. But let's look further at what the government's fire risk assessment for these very events says. When evaluating escape and exit routes, so this is what we're talking about here down the Green Linney, you will normally need to build in a safety factor by discounting the largest exit from your escape plan, and then determine whether the remaining exits or escape routes will be sufficient to evacuate all the occupants within a reasonable period of time. All these things are defined in this document. On page 69, it goes on further and says, note, the minimum number of exits that can be reduced by increasing the individual exit width, providing the number of exits available after discounting the largest is 2. In this case, there is only 1. So this site fails the basic government statements on health and safety for these events. The site is unsuitable. So from a public safety perspective, this site is not safe for the proposed events. And therefore, I think that license has to be not granted. So the second issue, from a public safety perspective, is the mixing of people and vehicles. And we've heard all the comments about the Linny. We're talking about an event, and the applicant, or let's say David of Ludlow Marches Festival, has talked about 6,000 people. We have to recognise the Linny is about 1 kilometre long. At its narrowest, the pinch point is even less than the access into the rugby ground. It's 4.3 metres wide at its narrowest, and that includes road and pavement. Now, what we're talking about here, so that's at the end that goes on to Court Street. At the other end, it doubles round and goes into the town. As I mentioned earlier, the pictures that in Ross's beautiful pack are the best part of the Linny. If you look at the more typical end, the Court Street end, where it's 4.3 metres wide, you've got the issue here that if you look at the Health and Safety Executive's guide to event, it says you should not, you must not mix people and vehicles. The key point here is that on the access, and I noticed David shaking his head earlier, was that if you've got an event and you've got to get emergency vehicles in there, be they fire engines that are typically 2.5 metres wide, or ambulances, which are typically in Shropshire 2.3 metres wide, it's not wide enough. If you then go and look at the Linny, and you've got maybe up to 5,000 people attending this event, you've got large numbers of people combined with vehicles on a road, which is not capable of management unless you close it. In which case you are affecting the 38 addresses on that road from making use of vehicles. So what I would suggest to you on these 2 grounds of access to the site, it has fundamental flaws that are a danger to people, a danger to public safety, and equally the Linny, by its very nature, you can't mix people and vehicles. It is unsafe. So I started off by saying when we came into it, as responsible people, we all scratched our heads saying, this doesn't feel right, there's something wrong. All you need to do in due diligence terms is look at this, or equally, the Health and Safety Executive guidance on such events, which is venue and site design, and reflect on what they say about transport and the mixing of people and vehicles. They're both no-nos. So in conclusion, I would suggest that in a sense, the process is a bit cart before the horse. Let's issue a license and then let's see what we can do. It should really be the other way around. As a responsible director of a club, exercising my, working to my responsibilities, I should be looking and saying, given the constraints that I've got, what can I do that is safe? And when you do that, the only conclusion that you can come to is events of this scale. And I know you shake your head, but these are government documents. This is Health and Safety Executive. This is the government's fire risk assessment for these very events. It doesn't meet the requirements.
I think, Chair, if I could, I need to.
Can I stop you there? I think you've made the point well. I'm going to move us on, and I'm just looking, to be honest, at 23 points that the Safety Advisory Group will cover for any large event, and I think part of that covers some of what you've been saying.
Thank you.
Could I first? I agree that the points on the face of it were significant, but what was being mixed were figures that don't apply. So if we're talking about 7,000 people, I totally agree. But actually what we're talking about, based on the usual breakdown, is half the attendance, say 3,000 people on the Saturday, and 1,500 on the Friday, 1,500 on the Sunday. Those in turn are all subject to churn. So somebody doesn't arrive in the morning and then stay all day, they go and they're replaced by different people. So the chances are there are never more than 1,000 people on the Saturday. I'll be generous and say it might be 1,500 present on the site at any one time. Second point that's getting, I think, a bit confused about this is we are experts over almost 30 years of getting large numbers safely into the castle, which has an entrance far smaller than the entrance that you've been quoted today. And we have indeed had medical emergencies that have been able to be accessed by ambulances. We have clear procedures for clearing spaces for vehicles to get in. And finally, in terms of responding particularly to Mr. Moore's point, we need to hold on to the fact that with the exception of the blue badge holders, vehicles will not be leaving the premises during the course of the day. So there will be very little need for separation of people and vehicles. And indeed, again, using the castle, that's precisely a skill that we've honed over the years. Vehicles come in, they go, but once they're in, they stay until the end of business. And then we have a very well rehearsed routine of moving groups of vehicles out, allowing pedestrians to move, and then starting up again. Actually, I don't wish to be flippant about this, but getting people in and out of the rugby club is a piece of cake compared to getting people out of a 1,000-year-old castle with a single entrance.
You?
When you've got your set-up vehicles going down the Linney, and when you've got a big, not just a car, but a big van, then again, you're causing huge congestion.
Yeah, I absolutely accept it's not easy, but you know, of all the organisations that might be attempting to do something like this, I think we do have the track record.
Thank you all. I'm going to move us on. And I don't really want to hear the same arguments
Yeah, I'm going to talk about
over
noise.
and over again now. So this is going to be something new.
I'm treasurer of the Ludlow the Tennis Club. I'm just going to speak briefly and say that we really, that very briefly for the tennis club, and then as a local resident, we value our relationship with the rugby club as a near neighbour, but we were very disappointed the rugby club did not see fit to consult us before the application. We would have liked to be asked. And then our major point is about the risk prevention of harm to children. Our members use this same Green Linney track to get to the tennis club, which is adjacent to the rugby club. On the Saturdays, weekends, there's a large amount of coaching, and our junior members use this track to get to the club. So that we are concerned about the safety of our junior members and also obviously about the other children on the Linney. And then one other point, we have a condition on our floodlights and on playing tennis, which means we have to finish at 10 o'clock. We just wonder why there's not a similar restriction on outdoor activities at the rugby club. So we agree with the other representations, but I leave the tennis club there. We live in Dinham, across the river from the rugby pitches. We are the nearest house. Our garden is 140 metres from pitch 2, where this festival is proposed to be. We hear everything from the rugby club at the moment. Other houses around the Linney also do. But noise from outdoor entertainment will be far louder. It will be heard clearly everywhere. And people need to be aware that at night, background noise levels reduce, noise travels further and seems louder when people are trying to sleep. It's also important to understand the amphitheatre effect. The rugby club is in an amphitheatre, and residents have described a bowl or a cauldron. The sound bounces off the castle walls to the east and the Whitcliffe escarpment to the south. So for people like us living on the side of a hill, it's particularly magnified. And for those living in the Cliff Park site, as Keith said, many of whom are over 70 and vulnerable, they live in caravans further up, in park homes, I beg your pardon, further up the hill, and with paper thin walls. Many are 70 and vulnerable, unable to make their own representations. And there are 39 of these park homes on the side of a hill directly facing these pitches. And why should these frail elderly people be subjected to excessive noise from live music late at night when they're not even well enough to object to it? So under the Licensing Act, the licensee, the rugby club, is required to submit an operating schedule stating the steps they propose to take to prevent noise becoming a public nuisance. Many councils require applicants to submit an acoustic assessment of noise as part of the licence application. Particular emphasis on low frequency and other things which are frequently subject to complaints. So the only measure the rugby club tell us they're prepared to take is to tell residents to close their windows to keep the noise out. So I would ask what assessment the rugby club has made, acoustic assessment of the impact
Okay, we're going back into the session on this licensing for Ludlow. Right, I think there was an answer from Verena.
With regards to the couple of points really to make, to clarify as far as vehicles are concerned, which seems to be getting very confused. In previous years, the rugby club offered car parking, which was 500 vehicles roughly per day going down the Linney and parking at the rugby club per day. In addition to that, they offered camping on the site, which there was between 60 and 90 pitches on the site. So those cars were coming and going during the day, etc. Neither of which will be happening if this license is granted and the Spring Festival will take place there. The 500 cars will be parking other places like the cricket club and within the town and the park and ride, etc., not at the rugby club. So there will be 500 cars less per day during the festival going up and down the Linney, plus the 60 to 90 pitches. How many cars that relates to, I'm not 100% sure, but they obviously come and go during the day. They won't be going there anymore because there's no camping going to be available. What will be traffic down there is, as I said before, the disabled parking, which maximum we think 60 disabled cars there, and the vintage cars. While we've been on the break, David has very kindly rung and found out how many vintage cars we're talking about. I think he said 60 to 70 before. We've actually got that from the office now as being 120 cars. Now, those cars will arrive before the general public, park up, and will be there all day until the general public have gone, and then those cars will leave. Not all of them will leave each day. Some of them will stay there and park up there for the duration of the event. So in total, there was 560 approximate vehicles going up and down the Linney during the festival. Under the proposed plan, there will be approximately 170 maximum. The other point making, yes, there is only one vehicle access. As far as the foot access, there will be at least 4 foot access. So people coming onto the site by foot, there'll be 4 accesses. I think that answers.
I'm sorry, do carry on.
There will be at least 4 access being made available for the actual event. I think that answered all your points. Is there anything else?
The question I had was in giving concessions to the open all hours thing, which went from early day dawn to late at night or early morning. It was down to 3 events and then an eight smaller ones in the year. So that's understood. That's going to take place in a concentrated period of time. So let's say spring to early autumn. It's weekends. That really does impact local people quite a lot. If that's true, and I want you to say confirm that first of all for me. And if that is true, what can be done about it?
As far as the 3 large events are concerned, there's a condition actually being agreed that there'll be at least 21 days between those events.
Right.
So it's 21 days between those. As far as the 8 smaller events, those won't necessarily be his birthday party that they all want, etc., which will be in December. It could be all year round.
These are outdoor,
the 8.
These are outdoor.
Yes, but those will finish by 11 o'clock. That's the conditions that we've agreed to with.
Yeah, that still has noise outdoor at that time.
Yeah, but it'll be cleared by 11 o'clock at night for those.
May I? I take your point. I struggle to see how you'd be able to host an outdoor marqueed partied music event during the rugby season because these are events that will inevitably be at the weekends when rugby will be going on, won't they?
Chair, I think the applicant has given an explanation. If you have to take on face value what she has said to you.
I'm going to move us forward into closing remarks. So each party will now be permitted a brief, and I repeat the word brief, opportunity to make any closing remarks. This should not be a repeat of the case already made or discussions during the questions. But you may have some points to clarify or additional comments as a result of the questions and discussions. If you have nothing further to say, you do not have to speak. We'll start with the licence.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to re-emphasise what you're here for today. So you're here to consider and determine the application, and to do this you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to promote the 4 licence objectives, any representations, the 182 guidance, the Licensing Act 2003 and Shropshire Council's licensing policy 2019 to 2024. You then may grant the application in full or in part, subject to such conditions deemed necessary and appropriate to the 4 licence objectives, or you can refuse if deemed appropriate for the licence objectives. Your decision must be justified and provide supporting evidence after to all persons involved, and the decision can be appealed within 21 days of all parties receiving the decision notice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to move on now to representative for the objectors, and I think that's going to be Glenn. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting the hang of this finally. Yes, thank you. Very, very briefly then, the councillors will obviously have to convince themselves that by granting the licence, then the issues around noise, traffic, mix of people, health and safety and the frequency of events aren't sufficiently challenging. Clearly that's something that we've rehearsed a lot over the last couple of hours. Believe passionately in supporting the rugby club to be a sports and rugby club, and I still maintain the last sentence in my address by not becoming an events centre. By that I mean, okay, look, if there's a rugby sevens tournament or there's a family fun day, I can see the reasoning behind that. Marquees with weddings, marquees with parties doesn't necessarily support, does it, the premise of being a rugby club, and as such, just mitigates against me being able to support this application in the way it's deemed. The condensing of the activities, I maintain, is a serious concern because they will be in the summer months. I'm convinced of that. And secondly, we've talked about traffic and the reduction of traffic, and just combining it with this rugby club being a rugby club or an event centre. I know it's not relative to the licence application, but in context it's important. The rugby club are going to house, I understand, 1,000 cars a night for 4 consecutive nights in the summer months, whilst there is a music event held on it in the castle. So there'll be 1,000 cars progressing down that linie, and that's an issue to us. Not related to the licence application, I get that, but it's just another example of a rugby club wanting to be an event centre to generate income rather than a sports club. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. And a closing remark from our applicant. Thank you.
I'm not intending to repeat anything that I've already gone through. I don't see any point in that. Just wanted to establish that the area that if we're talking about having a marquee for a event like a wedding or a birthday party of a club member, it is a case of that marquee would be situated not right in the middle of the rugby pitch, and also it's likely to be in the evening rather than when the match is going on during the daytime. But the marquee would be situated on other parts of the ground, not actually on the pitches itself. The events we're talking about, of the 8 events, those would re-establishing. If somebody's birthday is in December, then that will be when the birthday party is. Yes, there will be some of the events will be happening in the summer, but we have this agreement that the large events is going to be at least 21 days between them anyway, and the application has been curtailed considerably from what the club originally wanted. There's been a lot of negotiations between the club and the responsible authorities to get something that would work for what is reasonable for everybody. And we believe that what we have now proposed is reasonable for everybody, and it's not undue noise or concern for the residents, because that has been addressed within the conditions that we have agreed to already. I recommend that you agree what we've currently asked for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other than to reiterate what Ross has said, you must only take into account the relevant information that you've heard today.
Right. What happens now is we'll withdraw to deliberate and make a decision. The hearing will close and you can leave the meeting. All interested parties will be advised of the decision in writing within 5 working days of this hearing. The decision will be sent to you in the same way as you communicated with the licensing team prior to the hearing. So if you emailed your representation to the application, you'll receive the decision by email. Any party who feels aggrieved by the decision of the committee has the right to appeal to the Magistrates' Court. This appeal must be made in writing to Stafford Magistrates' Court within 21 days of the notice being received. I'd like to thank you all for your contributions. It's been quite an interesting meeting. And I hope we'll come to a decision in a fairly swift way. Thank you very much.